Welcome back. 2024 is a big year for elections. Wisconsin's legislature is waiting for Governor Tony Evers' signature on new voting maps, and there are some important races coming up here in Milwaukee. CBS 58's Emily Fannin and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's Jesse Opoyan discuss that and much more in tonight's Capital Connection. Opoyan.
The political battle over redrawing new voting maps could be nearing an end after Republicans in both chambers this week passed maps that were drawn by Governor Tony Evers. Now, this comes after it was almost essentially a redo for Republicans. After it was a few weeks ago, they made slight changes to Evers' maps. He vetoed them. This was kind of their second offering, and there were no changes to it this time. So it appears that the governor is likely to sign them, Jesse. But what was interesting during debate on this bill is that Democrats were widely opposed to it. I would say a majority of them were, because of a provision in the bill. Meanwhile, Republicans, they kind of argue that, yeah, they don't really like the map. They don't really love it because it does, impacts a lot of Republicans who are going to have to run against each other for the same district. But they also kind of described it as it's their last best resort because they prefer not having the state Supreme Court pick a map that could likely or possibly be more favorable to Democrats.
Right. The court was considering a number of submissions, and like you said, I think Republicans saw this as sort of the best of the worst for them. Democrats were suspicious. I think that that there was going to be some sort of trick, some sort of scheme involved in all of this, where Republicans would find a way to either challenge them to a higher court, or there was some concern that there was a provision in there, like you said, that they viewed as potentially being a carve-out for any upcoming special elections or recall elections, and we know Speaker Robin Vos may face a recall election. So the maps wouldn't go into place immediately. They would be in place for November elections, leaving those elections in between. Under the current maps, we found out that wasn't even anything that Republicans asked for. It was drafted by the Legislative Reference Bureau, and that was just kind of standard for how they would draft that bill.
Right, and this is kind of big news for what potentially it means for Republicans and Democrats. There's a lot of high stakes at play, and what I mean by that is that if these maps are signed by the governor, it would reduce Republicans' majority. By no means would it give a huge advantage to Democrats that they'd flip control, but it's all about having more competition. And Jesse, what does that essentially even mean for Democrats when it comes to issues and what's really debated here at the Capitol?
I think we've already started to see this as Republicans have become aware of the fact that they very well might have new maps. We've seen Democrats and Republicans working together on a lot more high-profile issues than we really used to. Things like shared revenue, things like the Brewers deal, even conversations about medical marijuana, conversations about trying to find some middle ground on abortion regulation. And I think that's just only going to continue if Democrats gain even a little bit of ground.
Right. And looking ahead to next week, we will now know that U.S. Senate race on the Republican side is going to start to take shape, as we know that Eric Hovde, a Republican, says he is going to make a formal announcement to run against incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin. We also have heard some whispers about potentially Scott Mayer joining the race as well. He's a Republican. He's a Franklin businessman. And Jesse, just overall looking at this race, we know that Tammy Baldwin, often is kind of a powerhouse in a lot of these elections. She's won by 10 or more points the last time she was up. But Republicans are hoping that if this is the right political environment, that they really hope to take her on.
Yeah, Joe Biden is not particularly popular. I think, if Tammy Baldwin, you're more likely to see Joe Biden win because Tammy Baldwin wins than Tammy Baldwin win because Joe Biden's at the top of the ticket. And, that was the case with Ron Johnson and Donald Trump in 2016, too. So not unusual for Wisconsin, but, Republicans see that sort of national unpopularity and want to see how much they can tie her to that.
And looking ahead to Tuesday, there is a primary, and we're going to focus specifically on what's going to be on the ballot in Milwaukee. And that is, of course, the Milwaukee mayoral race and the Milwaukee County executive race. Now, of course, the incumbents, Mayor Cavalier Johnson and Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, do have competition. They actually have the same individual, Aisha Griffin, who's running against them. But what we kind of want to drive home here, Jesse, is that they have a pretty good record, both of them, to run on.
Yeah, this is not a serious competitive primary challenge for either of them. They've shown that they can deliver for Milwaukee, the city, and the county. They've shown that they can work with Republicans in the legislature and get things done on shared revenue, and they've worked with Republicans to bring the RNC to Milwaukee. All while being really rising stars in the Democratic Party and still being, well-loved by Democrats. So they've got themselves set up for what should be, I would think, a pretty smooth Tuesday.
Right, and they also have a pretty good record if they may want to seek higher office in the future, which they might. All right, that will do it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us.